This is a quick video on finding midpoints with radians for your graphs. This is basically for a point, the midpoint formula is this. We're not trying to find that. We're just trying to find the x values, so we're only going to use this part. You add the two that you want to find the distance for, and you divide it by 2. So let's look at, we have radians here. And basically what I did is acting like our phase shift is to the right by pi over 3, and we're adding 2 pi because that's our period. And so we get 3 pi over 3, which is actually pi. Now once you get this, that's where you're supposed to complete your cycle. It's pretty clear, if I don't reduce this, that the midpoint between these two is 2 pi over 3. Okay, but to draw the, what do you want to do, cosine? To draw let's draw cosine. If we draw cosine, we know that we need a point here. I'm just drawing the characteristic curve here. We need a point here if you're to label your graph correctly. So to find these points, we take the midpoint. So I'm going to let this be my x1 and my x2, and I have to find the midpoint between the two. So I add them together. And I divide by 2. So that gives me 3 pi over 3 divided by 2. This cancels, so you get pi over 2. So the midpoint of this is pi over 2. Now to get this side, we do the same thing. We get 2 pi over 3 plus 3 pi over 3. And I like to leave it like this so you don't have to find the common denominator, all divided by 2. And that's going to give you 5 pi over 6, and then you divide it by 2, that equals 5 pi over 12. So that's how you would label it. Okay, let's do another one. I don't know how many, I think. All right, so basically I did the same thing. Let's say we're starting at pi over 2, and I want to add, let me do this, erase this for a minute. I want to add my period, say, is 2 pi over 3. So what I do is I take pi over 2 plus 2 pi over 3, and when you do that, I'm just trying to see where we're supposed to end with this, because this is my phase shift. You have your common denominator is 6. And I'll separate it out. So I say, what number times 2 is 6? And it's 3. So 3 times pi is 3 pi. All right, because that does equal 2 pi. What number times 3 is 6? 2. 2 times 2 is 4, so that's 4 pi. And we get 7 pi over 6. So this is where I'm ending. 7 pi over 6, and I'll draw a sine on this one. So I know I have to draw these points. And I'll just let this be 1 and this negative 1. And if I'm drawing sine, it would start here, go here, here, down to negative 1 and back. So there's my graph. But I don't know what to label this. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and rewrite pi over 2 as 3 pi over 6. So that is pi over 2. That's going to help me out. So instead of writing pi over 2 here, I'm going to write pi over 6. I'm going to do this in a different color. It's pi over 6, and this is 7 pi over 6 here. Now, can you tell what's the midpoint between these two just by looking? If not, what you do is you add them together. So let's add those together. Pi over 6. So we already have the common, it's not pi over 6, it's what? 3 pi over 6. So it's 3 pi over 6 plus 7 pi over 6 divided by 2. So that's going to yield 10 pi over 6 divided by 2, which gives you 10 pi over 12. You just multiply these two. You always just multiply these two over 12. So that's going to give us 5 pi over 6. And you should be able to tell just by looking that that's the midpoint, 5 pi over 6. Now, can you see what the midpoints are going to be between 3 pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6 without having to do all this messy work? Yeah, it'll just be 4 pi over 6. And this would be 6 pi over 6. And then if you want to reduce it, you can. This would be pi over 2. This would be 2 pi over 3. 5 pi over 6 can't reduce. This would be pi. And this would be now 7 pi over 6. Okay? Did I do another one? Let's say we're starting at, this will be the last one, negative pi over 6. That's where we have to start our graph. And my period is pi. So what I'm going to do is add these two together so I can see where I'm going to stop. So this is negative pi over 6. And I'm going to go ahead and write this as 6 pi over 6 because that equals pi. That means we're stopping at 5 pi over 6. So if everything is pi over 6, that's 0. Pi over 6. So what we're going to do is stop at 5 pi over 6. This would be, we need 5 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is where it would stop at 5 pi over 6. Alright. Now, what is the midpoint between these two? I've got this eraser on. Okay, what's the midpoint between negative pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6? So what you do is you add them together and divide by 2. Divide the whole thing by 2. And that gives you 4 pi over 6. And I'm going to go ahead over 6, divide it by 2. Which is really 4 pi over 12. Which gives me pi over 3. So my midpoint is pi over 3, somewhere here. I actually want to leave it in 6. So what I'm going to do is call this 2 pi over 6. Now, I just don't like all this stuff around. All right. I want to leave it. See, this is just messy. Let me erase all this. Okay. So now that I have that, I have to find the midpoint between these two. I'll go ahead and draw sine again because that's my favorite. And I know it's going to, I don't know about this. What's the midpoint between these two? So I'm going to add them up. Negative pi over 6 plus 2 pi over 6 divided by 2, which gives me pi over 6. So I'm going to take the 0 out. I'll put pi over 6. This is definitely not proportional. I'll put it really close here. Pi over 6. Alright? And then if I add these two up, I get 7 pi over 6 divided by 2, which is actually 7 pi over 12, which would go here. And then you can draw your sine wave because you have your 5 points. I'll do it in green. And there it would be. So basically all you're doing is you're adding your two values up that you want to take the midpoint between and divide them by 2. It's taking the average.